Today is November 14th, 2025. I'm here at the Virginia Tech Library in Blacksburg, Virginia. My name is Eliza Souser, and today I am working with
Camila Bohabot.
And today we are interviewing
Diane Helferich.
Do we have your consent to record today? Do we have your consent to record today?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
All right.
Have to talk a little slower. I'm a little hard of hearing.
Absolutely. I can do that.
Okay.
I'd just like to remind you that at any point today, if you'd like to pause or take a break, please just let us know and we can make that happen. Additionally, if we ask any questions that you do not want to answer, that is completely understandable and within your rights. We are also going to be able to review this before we put it anywhere, so just so you're aware of the process of what's going to happen when we're done here today. Okay, so starting off, what were your dates of service?
September of 1969 to July of 1971.
All right. Can you give me some background on your service with the military?
I joined, I signed up for the student nurse program where the Army would pay. I was in a 3-year program of nursing, and I had my senior year to go, and the Army had a program where they would sign up student nurses to join the Army after they graduated, and they would pay for their senior year. And so I signed up for that, and I was in the the student nurse ROTC in my school nursing for and I just got paid and went to school. And then when I had also when I signed up to be in the program, then we had to take the oath. They swore us in, and so that was part of our being associated with them, was the year that we did schooling, and then 2 years after that.
That's great. Were you deployed at all to a war zone, or
No,
were you in
yeah.
combat?
No, I was not.
And would you be able to tell us a little bit of your time in your training of being a nurse?
Sure. I went to a 3-year school of nursing. It was a diploma school of nursing at the time. I was in 66 to 69. So this is way back before we started doing a lot of the baccalaureates, and associate degrees were just brand new then. So basically, most of the nurses at that time, the majority, did graduate from a 3-year diploma. So and that we got a lot of clinical, there was theory and that, but it was all based with clinical. And so it was a very good way of learning, because we would get the theory and then it'd be almost immediately putting it into practice in the clinical area. So that really, once you see something on a book and then you see it in real life, it really imprints it. So we always thought that diploma nurses were the best, but then I've gone on to believe that whatever program you're in, it's what you get out what you put in, and it depends more on the individual than it does in the program.
Absolutely. We like to ask this question to make sure that veterans, get the help that they need. Do you have access to VA or Veterans Affairs Services?
I could if I wanted to, but I've never signed up for it. And Chris is always, because I was only in for just short of 2 years, that Chris said, well, you can still go out and get things. And I said, well, I've got insurance and everything, so I haven't done anything like that. But she's always been wanting me to do that.
Okay.
And just to clarify for the record, Chris is your daughter?
Yes, she is.
All right. We just like to make sure that these things are on the record.
Yes. Christina's my daughter, and you have interviewed her.
Yes, we have.
Yes.
So speaking of Chris, she was interviewed for this project. How did you feel about her joining military service before we circle back to your own, since she's come up?
Oh, well, because I joined. My mother was not happy when I signed up before I graduated, and then she was not happy at all that I had joined the military. Now, having me do that, and then Chris doing it, she did it about the same time in the middle of her program. Then she went into the ROTC program, and I said, "Go for it. If you want to do it." And she went into the basic, where they had to go to Fort Knox, and it's kind of the weeding out thing. See if everybody goes through it, but they don't take everybody to come in. And she did acquire or was given a ROTC scholarship for her last 2 years in college. So that worked out. I was really happy about that. And she had a lot of experiences that she wouldn't have had if she hadn't gone into military.
All right. And speaking of basic training, would you mind telling us a little bit about your own?
Okay. They always say there's nurses in the Army and then there's Army women in the Army. Okay, and they kind of make fun of nurses a little because we didn't have to do all the physical stuff and everything like she had to do with the hikes and jumping off, in the water with all her gear on and that. We basically, they sent everybody, that nurses and doctors, when they first went into the military, were all sent to Fort Sam Houston, Texas. And that's where we got indoctrinated into the Army's way of doing things. We were already trained with how to do our skills, but then we had to apply that to what was going to be asked of us with the military and getting us things. So basically, what the 6 weeks that we were there was to get us ready to go to Vietnam. We were all kind of ready to do that. When I left there, I figured I got sent to Fort Campbell right away, and that was under the 101st Airborne was out of Fort Campbell, and they were in Vietnam for a long time. And while I was there, they were not there. People were getting trained there. But so that's what we were trained for. And I was ready to go if they were going to send me, but they put me down at Fort Campbell. And I worked in a lot of different places because I was a brand new graduate. And I took care of the soldiers, and I took care of children. And I did a lot of different areas where I could get exposure to different things and how to do things in the military. And I was at Fort Campbell for about 9 months. I got there in November of 69, and I left in August of 70. And I was told in January I was going to be on the next list out to Vietnam somewhere in the spring. So my fiance at the time, I told him about that, and we were planning an October wedding. And the chief nurse said, if anybody's planning a wedding for this coming year, forget it. If you want to get married now. So I told him that. I said, hey. So he came down and we got married at Justice of the Peace. And then later we went up to Cleveland because mothers and sisters got the marriage blessed in church, all those kinds of things. But so anyway, then June rolled around and I hadn't gotten my orders yet. So I went down to the chief nurse and I said, I was all set to go. I didn't get my orders. And she said, And then I said, but my husband had just graduated from college. He was in a 5-year program, and he had a job at Annapolis in the research and development lab there, ship research and development. And I said, Fort Meade is kind of close to that. Could you station me at Fort Meade? I asked her that in June. In August, I was there. She goes, she's a full bird, and she'd been in a while, and she knew how to get things done. So, and it was funny because another one of my roommates, one of my colleagues in the Army, she was also engaged to get married, and she didn't go to Vietnam either. But the 2 single girls that we had in our house with us, they went to Vietnam. But for some reason, we did not go, and I don't know why. We never said anything to anybody. When I found out I was still there, she got me to Fort Meade. So I did my last time at my last year, almost a year, Fort Meade.
That's great. I'm glad you were able to move around.
Yeah,
with
and we finally got to live together after 4 months.
That's great.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, it was an exciting time.
Of course. Knowing that you could have been sent to Vietnam, how did you feel about that? Were you nervous? Were you accepting of it? How were you?
Well, I knew that it was totally possible that I was going to go to Vietnam, and we are one of the few branches of women in the world that were stationed, except for the Red Cross girls, who they call the Donut Dollies, which I think is a kind of a put down on them because they did a lot, but they went over to Vietnam too. But the Army nurses, basically everybody else was on a ship or they'd be in and out. But the Army nurses were basically the ones that were down on the ground wherever they were at. Like if you saw MASH, that was kind of like about what it was. And so I totally thought it could happen. I did have a dream one night that I was getting ready to go to war, and I was scared. And, not getting shot at and everything. And then I just woke up and I said, forget that, what's going to happen is going to happen. And there's people, I've had veterans in our family that went to war. My grandfather was in World War I, and my uncle and father were in World War II and Korean War. And so there was that was, and we just, if you're going to make it, you're going to make it. And that's just what's going to happen. I didn't really obsess on that. No, but I was ready to go. When you got through there, they made you say, sign me up, because you're like, oh yeah, it's so. Anyway, and when you're young, you think you can do anything. You're not, nothing scares you really.
No, I understand that.
Do you think that kind of attitude that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, do you think that helped you during your time in the military?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I just kind of lived each day. It helped me adjusting, handling when Chris was deployed twice, too, because I just said, "It's what it is." I never allowed myself to dwell on anything negative, and she came home, So,
Yes.
so I had to do the same thing with her. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned you had your father, your grandfather was in the military, Chris was in the military. Was there anyone else that was in the military in your family?
Yeah, my three brothers all were served in the Army, and my sister served in the Navy. So there were six of us, and five of us that went into the military.
Did your family being in the military influence your own decision to enlist with the Army and the nurses, or was that just a purely financial decision for the college?
Basically, it was purely financial. It was, but then it was. I wanted to. My mother was paid for. She paid for my first 2 years of nursing school, the tuition, and I just, I thought, no, I didn't want to get this burden off of her. So I went to the office at the school and I said, Sister Grace, how can I get my senior year paid for? And she goes, well, let's see what we have here. She goes, well, you could join the Army. And I went, give me that. And I saw 2 years. I think I can do that. That'll pay my whole year. Easy, I'll take it. And it was just, it was just one of those things. And three or four of my classmates also, two went into the Navy and three of us were signed up for the Army. So it was something that was happening at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned you had was it 5 other siblings?
No.
You had 5. How many siblings did you have?
Oh, I have 6. I have 5 siblings, 6 of us.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. How was your relationship with them? 5 of you were in the military. Would you be able to kind of explain your childhood with them by chance?
Well, I was the oldest. So, and I was the youngest one next to me is almost 4 years younger than me, my sister. So everybody else was like 7, 8, 9, 10. So I was long out after they went in because they were just in grade school and that when I went in. But I was just really proud of them. And my the two older brothers were in the 82nd Airborne, and then the younger brother was in cryptology, all the codes and stuff. And so it was really exciting what they were doing. But everybody went in, did their time. My sister went in. She was a Corps wave in the Navy. And so everybody went and did their time. And Mother ended up being very proud of all of us.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Your mother was also interviewed for this project.
Yes.
Do you think, was she in the service during the same time that she had all of you?
No. She was the reason Mother was in this program, because she said, why are they taking me? Because I never was in the military, was she was in the nurse cadet program that was sponsored by the Public Health Service. And that started out in 43 and it went to 48. So it was a program where if you've seen the Ancestry.com commercials where this woman says, my aunt so-and-so she signed to go into the military when she was 17 years old. Well, she signed to go into school of nursing. They put you through the school of nursing. They paid for everything, your uniforms, everything. You got a stipend. My mother was in Columbus. She got free tickets to the Ohio State games. She could ride the bus anywhere, as long as they had their cape on, and everything. She said it was just amazing. And all they had to do was say that they would, after they graduated, they'd either go into military, public service, or they had to stay in nursing until for the continuation of the war, till the war was over. That's the only thing they had to sign up for, and they got everything. It was just really a good deal. They got everything paid for.
And do you feel you had a similar experience?
No, mine's totally different. No, I never got free games to Ohio State. I had my husband snuck me in on his student tickets for other people to go. No, it was no. My mother was very brave in sending me to Mount Carmel because it was one of the more expensive schools in nursing at the time, and we lived in Kansas, Leavenworth, Kansas, and uh, Mount Carmel's in Columbus, Ohio. So that was a long way, and that was a lot of sacrifice for her to send me there. So, but because it was a really good school of nursing, and she wanted me to go there, and I'm glad she did because it gave me a great basis. But she was a little disappointed because she thought I was going to go right away into getting my bachelor's degree like she did. She graduated in June, and in July she was at St. Mary's Notre Dame working on her bachelor's. She just did it right away. And she says, "That's the only way to do it. That's what you got to do." And I said, "No, I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to do something else."
Did you always know that you wanted to be a nurse?
From about the time I was 10 years old, I realized, what my mother did and everything. I want to be like her. Yeah, I always wanted to be like her. Strong lady.
Yeah. So you were a nurse. Would you be able to tell us any impactful stories that you've had in your time around the time of the Vietnam War as
Mhm.
a nurse? Is there
Oh,
anything
golly.
that sticks
You mean
out?
as with when I worked at Fort Campbell or?
Yes, at Fort
Okay.
Campbell.
Okay. Fort Campbell. Okay. Yeah. When I started out at Fort Campbell, they had me on a pediatric unit. So I was taking care of children of service people. And there were some pretty sick little kitties in there and some things that went on. And I was only there for a few months. And then they took me out and put me on into the hospital where they needed me on different um, med surg units and things like that. And one of the things that was different about Fort Campbell was that it was a basic training post, and the guys got basic training there, all the kids right out of high school, and then they usually sent right off to Vietnam from there because that's where 101st was. So we would have hundreds of recruits going through all the time, and I can remember being on they called them URI floors. Uh, there is a disease that goes around where you're in close spaces with a lot of people that's deadly, and it's meningitis. There's a certain form of meningitis. And the first symptoms of meningitis are those of a cold. So every recruit that complained of cold, sore throat, whatever, they were put in the hospital until we could clear them up. And then we had to watch all of them for the signs of that. And one of the things we had to check their body for was called petechiae or purple spots. And but then we would have there were like 2 or 3 floors I'd be responsible for at one time, and there would be like 100 people on each floor. I mean, it was really just a lot of guys, and they all had their heads shaved, they all had blue bathrobes on, and a little funny story about that. When I was up there watching the corpsmen give the meds and stuff, and kind of looking at the guys and seeing which one pull out and which ones I had to check. And this one guy came through, and I said, "Are you from Columbus, Ohio?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh, did you work at Weber's grocery store right across the street?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "You were a bag boy?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I was a student there." And he goes, "Oh, I wouldn't recognize you. You all looked alike in uniform."
That is
And he
funny.
was one of like 300 people I was looking at that day. I just remembered him because he was a single person, and the one thing there. But it was funny that I recognized somebody. What are the odds of that happening? That, but yeah, because they really did all look alike too. So, but anyway, the other thing I saw the outcome of what happens if somebody got meningitis, and if they got it and we couldn't treat them in time. I don't know whether it was a time factor or how strong the virus was or the meningitis was. That it was deadly. And I went over to the medical units where they had the ones who were called their families in because they weren't going to make it. And the blotches went all over their bodies, and they were just miserable. And it was a horrible thing to watch. So really opened me up to we really have to watch these guys, that are coming through, because they had 4 or 5 guys in there, and their parents were there saying goodbye to them, and they hadn't even gotten through basic. It was, to me, that was I couldn't put myself in the place of the families. It was so sad. And they were young guys, right out of high school.
Yeah, that is awful. Um, th- because you had just recently become or s- started experiencing that as a nurse in the military.
Mhm.
Did you have any ways to cope with such tragic things, or, seeing young people go through
Mhm.
things like that is very difficult. So
Mhm.
how did you cope with that, may I ask?
Well, the thing is when you're taking care of somebody, and you'll see if you see something in the movies and you see how they handle things, uh, it's totally different when you're because I've the first time I saw the movie of a baby being born when I was in nursing school, I had to put my head between my knees because I thought I was going to pass out. The first baby I saw born, really, in the delivery room, I was just in awe. It was like, wow, you know. So when you're actually in it, you don't have time to be thinking, oh, how do I feel about this? Or how's that? A little drop of blood in the floor, somebody else might notice it. We wouldn't if we're in the middle of a trauma, because what you're focused on is the person, the situation, and what you can do to help them. And so uh, it was always about caring for the person and not. Now it's hard when because I worked with mothers that had kids that were hurt and stuff like that. I'd worked in ER for a while, and uh, and I would have to fight somebody was kids that was my age, and this one, you know, they had their daughter or somebody was hurt. I had to say, that's not my child. It's their child. I got to support them. I got to be there for them. I'm not going to break down with them. Unless sometimes you do. Sometimes you just take the hand and cheers together. It just depends on what's going on in the situation. But basically, it's the focus is on taking care of the patient and all the emotions that you have. And, you know, here's the way we put it is when somebody comes into the emergency room and they're all cut up and bleeding, if we went, oh, you go, what? My gosh, you can't, we can't do that because that would scare the person coming in. So you'd have to look and say, okay, now how'd you do this or what's going on? And we just start like it's nothing because you just want to get to what we have to do for them, get them out of pain, keep them from getting infection, treating them. So, all that sort of stuff. So that's the focus. That's where your mindset is. That's how. Now, there are times when I've had terrible things happen. I saw things happen and I really felt bad for things. And I would just have to deal with that on my own, not let it keep me from doing what I needed to do. Everybody has
Absolutely.
hard things. Yeah.
Were any of those during your time in the military?
Oh, well, some of the things I'm talking about is no. Uh, I'm trying to think. What you see in the military is different things that you would never see outside. Like outside in nursing, regular in this country, you don't see typhoid. And I saw a situation that really woke my eyes up. Do you know what betadine is? It looks like it's a really dark brown. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. And so this guy had just come in and we were kind of watching him and it was at night and I was on 3 to 11 and I walked in and I thought, who put this big wash basin full of betadine next to his bed? I said, who put this betadine next to your bed? And he says, oh, that's my pee. And I went, yeah. And I said, what? And I called the doctor. He says, and he peed a lot. He had a lot of urine in there. And so they come and he had what's called black water malaria, and it was very deadly. We had to get him right off to the ICU because it was and I would have never come across that if I hadn't have been where somebody had just gotten back from a jungle, or that's things like that. And so there are other just little things like that, and other things when I was working in OB at Kimbrough, there would be fathers that were in Vietnam when their mothers were having the babies, and you had to deal with all that, and then some. It was just very interesting. Yeah.
So, what fort were you at when you were working on the OB ward?
That was Fort Meade.
And is there anything that you took from working, I guess, in the OB sector that you were able to kind of bring in as a mother? Like if someone got like, well, at some point you had a newborn. So is there
Uh-huh.
anything you kind of took in from being a nurse, I guess? Is it better? Let me be more specific,
No, I'm just laughing
more
because I
broad.
do have a story for you on
Oh,
that.
okay. Let me
Yeah.
reword that. Is there anything you took from being a nurse that went into your mothering? I guess I
Okay.
should say.
Okay. Well, here's the thing about that. Uh, my last, the reason I got out about 6 weeks earlier than I was supposed to was because I was pregnant with my first son, with my son. And So, so I was taking care of all these babies. We were birthing babies all the time, and we were taking care of them in the nursery, knew how to handle the babies, and I was just fine. And so then when I had my son, and they handed him to us, and we didn't have car seats. This was the year before they started doing car seats. Put him in my arms, and I'm going, oh my God, what are we going to do now? And I had just been taking care of babies, so the first night when we all went to sleep that night, and I hear something in the middle of the night, and I'm going, what is that? And then all of a sudden I went, we have a baby. So I had to get up. And the first thing I wanted to do was, after I changed his diaper, I wanted to mark it down somewhere that he had, like you would do for a baby. And no, this one's mine. I just have to watch him. So it was kind of like, no matter, and I thought, I really felt for these 18-year-old kids that were bringing a baby home for the first time, and they didn't have the background I had. And I was like, what am I going to do? I just, it was just it was eye-opening for me. But I knew how to do those things and stuff. So it worked out. It worked out fine. But it was just kind of realizing the awesome responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
you
go ahead.
so you left 6 weeks early because you were pregnant.
Yes, yeah. I didn't have to. I could have stayed in. They just opened it up so you could stay in. But my husband said, no, let's get a little more time before the baby comes that we could have before the baby. So we did that. I wish now I would have stayed in, because I really, really liked what I was doing. But it's one of those things.
Was the transition from being with the military to being a civilian, how did that go for you?
Well, I actually didn't. I didn't work very much in nursing after I got out, until the kids were getting ready. They were getting like kindergarten, first grade, and that getting to school, that I really started to go back and do something. It had been a while since I had done the Army nursing, so I was just going back in and just getting myself acclimated again. One of the things I did do, my husband and I both did, was we joined the fire department, volunteer fire department, when the kids were little in '74, and I was on that until '80. And we did fire and rescue, and I became a paramedic during that time. So that was something that we just did, so somebody could watch the kids while we were going, and that kind of kept my hand in it. So it was a natural transition for when I wanted to go back to work. I went to the hospital emergency room, the emergency room of the hospital that we took most of our patients to, and said I wanted to work there, and they brought me right in, and then that was just, it was magnificent. I loved working in the emergency room, and didn't like it before. Didn't even like the thought of it before. But once you got the paramedics and the fire department, and seeing the people on the streets that don't make it into the hospital. See, in the hospital, you get the ones that made it. Out with you're doing fire and rescue, it could be anything happening out there. So it kind of toughened me up, and so I was ready to do the hospital, and that seemed a little easier, because I was not out by. Well, anyway, it's just one of those things. Yeah. I knew more about it.
Yeah, I see you've had a knack for helping people always.
Well, that's what nurses do.
Well, of course.
Most people say they go into it because you want to help people. Yeah.
Yeah, so once the children were, I guess, in elementary school, you were a paramedic, and that was a good transition, I would say.
It was. It was a good transition. Yeah.
Were you a nurse, I guess, for your whole career? And I guess circling back to before, how did helping people in that capacity help you in being a mother?
Oh, yeah. Actually, working helped me be a better mother, because when I was home with them a lot, I kind of got burnout. Once I got back to work and then came home, I was a much more patient in everything, because when I came home, I felt like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. I was supposed to be a mother, but I also wanted to use my nursing and help somebody else. So I was kind of fulfilling all the things that I wanted to do. And with my husband, he was so good about helping with the kids and taking care of them. I worked 3 to 11, so they wouldn't have to be the babysitters too long and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Would you say your time in the emergency room compared to your time as a nurse for the Army?
It was very similar. Because I always like to be in something where I like it where I always like the acute situations where somebody really needs you right now, like they're having a baby, so they need somebody that knows how to take it. And then, or in the emergency room when they come in and they're having an emergency situation. It's I like to be in those situations where you have to you don't everything you have to evaluate the situation. You don't know what you're into until you check the mother and see how far along she is, or until you check and see if you got an artery, or something like that. So you always had to have all your senses, and it was just, and I like that, give an adrenaline rush. We can, oh, here we are, we're going to do this, and that things would just become like you knew what you needed to do, and you could save people's lives, and the doctor and you sometimes wouldn't even have to talk. You just knew what you were doing, and you had things because you saw what was happening, and it was a really good. I loved working like that when you worked with somebody that were good and you could get things done and to help people save lives.
When you transitioned to working on the OB ward, was that your choice?
Yes, that was my choice. Yes, because that was one of my favorite places. And I like the labor and delivery because that's the labor and delivery was they're coming in, they need you right now. We got to get the baby born. And then I like to send them out there and say, okay, now you guys go get your rest and take care of the babies and all that. And I said, can bring the next one in for the, yeah, I like the action.
I wanted to kind of switch the topic a little bit and get a perspective of what it was like to be a woman in a male-dominated field, which is the military. I was wondering if you had any experiences you wanted to talk about or give your room
You
to
mean
talk
as
about.
I was treated differently because I was a woman? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
because nursing is a predominantly female profession, but the military is not predominantly female. So
Yes.
things were, yeah. Um, the biggest thing that really irked me when I was in was that when my husband and I eloped and got married, he was in his fifth year of a 5-year program in engineering at Ohio State. So when we got married, he came down and I got his blood test, done at the hospital, and then we went and got married and all that sort of stuff. And then I took him over to the ID place because he was married. We were married now, so he could get a dependent ID. So he did. He got a dependent ID, so he could go to the grocery store with me, commissary, PX. He could get medical treatment because he was my spouse. Well, then he graduated, and he was working at Annapolis, and I got transferred to Fort Meade. And so I went over. I said, you know what? Let's go get you a new ID because oh, I don't know why I wanted to. I forget. I guess I forget what I wanted to do, but I went over there and they were gonna. I said we need his ID, and this is why. Who's the military? I said, well, I'm military. He said, oh, he's not your dependent anymore. I said, what do you mean he's not my dependent? I mean, he's my husband. And they said, nope, he's not your dependent anymore. So he couldn't get an ID. He couldn't get medical care. He couldn't go to PX with me. He couldn't go to the commissary. Couldn't get on the post, without me being there. And it was only because I said to them, what do you mean? It's because he's working now and everything. I said, I work with nurses whose husbands are enlisted and they make twice as much as he do, and they're dependents, and they can go to the grocery store and they can do all these things. And they said, it's just the way it is. So that was in 70. I think it was in 72 or 73, somewhere around there. Ruth Bader Ginsburg brought a case like this to the Supreme Court of an Air Force woman whose husband could not get the treatment. Same thing happened, and she brought that through, and the Supreme Court made a decision on it that was unconstitutional, and they could do that. So that was I thought, I told him, I said, let's just keep that old ID card. It's still got a date on it. We're going to go. I said, I think they're wrong, and you just come with me when we're going grocery shopping. Stuff like that. So yeah, that kind of irked me a little bit. Most of the time, though, in the military, I just don't feel like I was in that long that I had but it was that part right there that really got me, was that just because he was a male and I was female, that he couldn't have the benefits of being my spouse in the military.
Would you mind telling us if there were any other incidents or issues that kind of affect you in that kind of personal, emotional sense?
Oh, you mean, was I sexually assaulted?
anything that was you're comfortable talking
I
about.
did have it. I did have an. I don't know if you've had read anything else or talked to anybody that's talked to me, but when I was in basic training, it was the last night before, and I was engaged when I went. By the way, last night before we were going to graduate the next morning and head off to where we were going. And so there were a bunch of us that were at there was a junior officers club that was at the quadrangle in the middle of Fort Sam, where all the doctors and nurses that were in basic would meet there, and just have drinks and things. So I was there with 3 or 4 girls, and these other guys, were talking with them, and this one guy, he was a doctor. We got to talking, and they were getting ready to go. And I said, okay, well, I'll see you. And he says, I can take you home. And while I'm over it, he said, okay. So I finished my drink, and then he said, well, let's go over to the officers club. And I said, I'm getting tired. I really don't want to go to the officers club. I just want to go home. And next thing I remember, I woke up in the parking lot of the officers club, and he says, this is the officers club. I said, I just take me home. I'm really tired. I just don't feel right. And so he said, okay, so next thing I know, we are on a street somewhere. It has to be in the Fort Houston, because I could see across a field of tall grass way over. I could see the hospital, but it was an open field. I don't know how far away it was. And I said, get me back. And he started attacking me. And I was in a little sports car, and I reached for the door handle, and there wasn't a door handle. And I looked back, and there was no lock on the door. And then he started really getting on me. And I looked down at my feet, and I looked, the only way I'm going to get out of here is if I can turn around real quick and kick that door open, and grab your purse. What are women thinking, But I had my hand in my purse, and I just pushed back real hard, swung around, kicked the door open, and jumped out. I don't know how I jumped out of that without decapitating myself, but I was, you're scared when something like that happens. So I started going down the road there, and I remember one lonely street light, no buildings around. And he said, you stupid girl, get back in the car right now. And I said, I'd be stupid if I got back with you. And if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to the MPs right now. I'm reporting you. And he took off. So I thought, I wonder if he was even a doctor, or he was even in the military. I had no idea. So I went back I was all disheveled, and I went back I finally made it across the field. I could see the light of the hospital. I made it across the field, got there, and my suite mate said, you look like you've been attacked. I said, funny you should say that. Yeah, he wasn't very nice. So I told her what happened. So anyway, the next day we were in our platoons, and I saw the doctors marching by, and there was that guy. He was a major. He said he was an orthopedic surgeon. He was marching on by, and I went, well, you son of a bitch. I said, my goodness. But I didn't report it to anybody, because who's going to believe me? And how was I didn't have his name or anything. So anyway, it was just, I don't know whether he had put something in my drink, because I don't know what happened, but I was in and out of it for a little bit until when you get afraid and your adrenaline starts pumping, and it's maybe life or death. That's, and it was my guardian angel was with me on that night. But that's the only, and that, because nothing really happened except he was all over me, and there wasn't a lot of room to move around the car, but the fact that I got out, I wasn't really traumatized by that much, because I got away, and I felt like I was more in control than being a victim. So anyway, yeah. But everybody has a story. Just about everybody I know has had some kind of a issue with sexual trauma. In fact, my daughter does a lot of that, military sexual trauma. She and some of her colleagues have been lecturing on that stuff.
Absolutely, and I'm so sorry to hear about that.
I was just so, when I got out of it and everything, I was just thinking, wow. I mean, I would have, if I had no idea, and I don't think I had enough time to worry about whether I was going to live or die. I just wanted to get out. And I guess you can kick pretty hard when you're scared or you need to get out.
You had good instincts.
Thank you for telling us.
A big theme that I've worked on this project for a little bit now, a big theme that I've noticed is that women, especially in the military, fear that their word doesn't mean very much. And you just expressed a similar thought.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think of.
Yeah. Could you kind of speak on that? Is there anything that you want to say to people who have had similar experiences, or anything like that?
Well, things I guess are starting to change a little bit for the better, but there's still a whole lot of denial on that situation with in the military. That's still a problem. Uh, and it really depends on the individual how much they want to what they h- how they handle things. And some people just don't want to go through. I mean, when I was in the ER, we did rape kits on people and the stuff they had to go through, and then to get to press charges against somebody, it is a nightmare. And usually it is to the woman's detriment because the first thing they try to do is try to discredit her as her character and thinking that she was, a prostitute or something. And so it's just a hard thing to deal with, but you just have to do what you think is right in your heart. And with him, it was so many of us were just leaving and we didn't know anybody and we were all just going over. For me to, even try and report him would have been ridiculous because I had no way to. I can still tell you what he looks like, but I think now you know how things change. But anyway, it's just you just have to take it with whatever you can handle.
Absolutely.
Did you tell your fiance at the time about this?
Oh, I called him up right away. I called him up and I told him what happened, and he said, "Damn that son of a bitch." He knew I didn't do anything to bring that on, and he was just and we all just would talk to people, and everybody was I always felt safe there because everybody was in the same boat. We were all away from home. We were all getting ready to go into the military. Big changes in our lives, and I just never felt threatened in that situation until that happened. I was really blown away. And my husband, he was upset. Now he wasn't upset with me, to his credit. He knows me better than that.
Would you say that feeling of safety changed or was gone after that happened?
I think I was just a little more cautious. I was, yeah. And I've always been cautious about safety wherever I'm at. When I'm going to a car, whatever I'm doing, wherever I'm going, I always try to look for the way out if something was going to happen, or going across the parking lot, stuff like that.
Yeah. Another big point of this project, or a big focus of the project, I should say, was policy changes. And earlier you mentioned a policy change. You mentioned Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I guess I wanted to ask, were there other major policy changes that you remember while you were there, or just during the time of the Vietnam War and such?
Yeah. Well, the big change was that when I first went in, if you got pregnant, you were out that first year. The next year, that next year in 70 was when I think they changed it, and you had a choice. You could stay in or get out. So, yeah, that was the big thing. And I'm trying to think, as far as policy changes, other than that, what I talked about.
Did you, during your time there, did you know anyone who did get pregnant and decide to stay in?
No, most of the ones I knew that got pregnant at that time chose to get out before their time was up. Yeah. Or they were forced. I remember one girl got pregnant in basic, and one of the nurses, and she was supposed to be going over to Vietnam, and she was gone. Next thing I knew, she was gone. She didn't even stay in the army. So, but I think that was before they had the rule change.
Circling back to your husband, did you meet him during your time in the military?
No, I met him when I was going to nursing school. We met on a blind date, and yeah, and then we just ended up. That was it.
Did he have any kind of reaction when you told him that you were enlisting with the army?
He was very upset because I didn't tell him I was going to do it. We were dating at the time. We hadn't been dating a year yet when he had made a comment about, I forget, something was going on, and I said, "Oh, you didn't tell me about it." He says, "Well, we're not uh, just exclusively dating one another or anything, so we don't have to we can do whatever we want. So that weekend I had another date with somebody else, and he tried to get a hold of me, and he couldn't get a hold of me. He was upset. I said, well, we're not exclusive, But anyway, but he said I was chasing him. It was so cute. So then when I was going into this dilemma with my finances and trying to take it off my mother and that sort of thing, he's one of the reasons I did it, because he said, your mother's paying, you're a leech. And I said, a leech? So I said, okay, I got to do, that's another thing. So as I told him, I said, well, and he was, yeah, I told him, yeah, I was 68. So he wasn't down in Columbus when I was working that summer there. And I told him, I said, well, I joined the Army. I'm going to be going into the Army after I graduate next year. And he goes, what? You're running away from me. I said, which way do you want it? I was like, so anyway, he was not happy at all. He didn't like the fact that I was going to go in the Army. He really didn't like the fact that I was going to be going to Vietnam. He really was worried about that. He just didn't, but he's always been very proud of my service. He always has, and he's always been very proud of our daughter. And he has, and my mother too. They both hated the fact that I had gone in. But I said, well, I've already raised my right hand, so whatever you say makes no difference. I'm going. Said that to my mother and to my husband, the boyfriend at the time.
So their attitudes changed from the time that you enlisted to
Yeah.
by the
Well,
time
I'll
you were
tell
done.
you, when I enlisted, when I was going in, I remember saying to myself, I'll never tell my children their mother wore combat boots, because it was not the thing to do at that time. There were a whole lot of anti-war and race riots and everything were going on. It was a big upheaval. If you look at 68, 67, in the 60s there, it was really bad. And it wasn't, and the military were getting spat on, when they came out, and there was no glory in going into the military. And and somebody said, why are you going in? I said, well, other than the money to pay me through school, I believe that most everybody that was going to war was drafted. They didn't do it voluntarily. I said, and they need people that know what they're doing to take care of them. And if I can help in that, then that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. To kind of continue with that, there was a lot of anti-war movements then. Would you be able to explain that time a little more, just for context, your ideas on the war, and I guess your ideas on the war then and your ideas on the war now?
Well, I didn't like the fact that we were at war in Vietnam. I didn't like the fact guys were going over there and get killed. I didn't understand the whole history and look back at it and I was like, why were we there? But I was there for the people who had no choice about going over there and they needed to have the help. So I thought, but then the other thing too is I remember we had raincoats that were really cool looking raincoats for our uniform. But they said, if you're ever going to wear them out in public, take all of your rank and everything off of them, because it's not real popular if somebody thinks you're in the military, you're out there walking around, So it's okay. So I never said much about, when I was in the military, about if I was out in public. Though I did do some military standbys, and you had to have your uniform on for that. But everybody was just kind of like, nobody bothered me then.
So that makes your experience very different from your mother's and your daughter's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Quite different.
Yeah. On a different note, I don't know why I just thought of it, but were there any close friends that you made while you were there? Is there anyone you still talk to? Could you just, in general, tell me about the connections that you made while you were in your service?
Oh, in the military? Yeah, I have. I still have a good friend, uh, uh, Mary Grabowski. She was. That's not her name anymore. She got married, but we were in the same platoon in basic, and then we both got to Fort Campbell, and then we said, "Oh, I remember you from our platoons," and we ended up getting a house together, and then we got a couple other nurses that we had been. We didn't know, but they were at Fort Campbell. So there was about 4 nurses that we had, and we had 3 bedrooms. So we all worked different shifts. So you just got in the bed that was empty when it was time to sleep. And it was really a wonderful time. And we would do things together and we'd have fun. We'd go to different and there was another house of nurses, some other place, and we all had different ways of living and that, and we'd get together. And it was a lot of support. We had a lot of good times. It was great.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and you're still friends now, I assume?
Well, I saw Mary. Her husband was trying to figure out where I was, because there's a picture that I don't have it around her hanging, but there was a picture that my husband took of Mary and I, well, at Fort Campbell, in the back areas of Fort Campbell, and there was a small ravine that we jumped over, and we had our hands up in the air and our feet were in the air, and he caught us in the air, and we were just sailing over, and he caught us in midair. And so her husband had that, Mary's husband had that picture over his desk, and he goes, "Wonder what's happened to Di," and then so he found me up, found me, and it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago that they came to visit us, and we hadn't seen one another in uh, golly, since the early 70s, early 70s, very early 70s, yeah, that we'd seen them last time. They'd only had one child, maybe, yeah, just one child at the time, and then they ended up having 8. And so it was
Wow.
interesting. Yeah. Oh, they were very interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you guys ended up finding each other again.
Uh-huh.
Life works in great ways.
That was fun. Because she was engaged and I was engaged, and we were both Catholic girls, and it was we had a lot in common. She went to a Catholic 3-year diploma school in Cleveland, and so she was a very nice friend to have. Very smart.
I'm glad.
So we know that you have Chris, and you mentioned your first child was a son. How many children do you have?
2.
Just the 2. Did your son
Just the 2.
Did your son ever get involved with the military?
No, it's only a female thing in our family, in this family. Yeah, no, he wanted to after 9/11, but he figured he was too old. But Chris was in the military when 9/11 happened, and it changed because she was going to get out. She was within a year of getting out of the military when that happened, and then that's what spurred her to stay in and make it a career.
Yes, and after working on her project, I know that you have some grandchildren. Um, How you've told us how being a nurse has affected being a mother. How has it affected being a grandmother?
Oh, grandmother's totally different. I love being a grandmother. We are not responsible for everything that happens to them, and we can spoil them rotten. Yeah, and they're very our kids have been very nice about letting us do that.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah.
We had a question earlier that was, how would you react, I guess, if any of your grandchildren could go to the military? How would that be for you? How would you react?
Well, my son has a stepson who just got into the coast, no, the Navy. He's in the Navy, right? He was at Great Lakes and he graduated, and he is going to be in helicopter rescue. And so so he's still in his AIT stuff right now, and we're so proud of him that, and if any one of my grandchildren wanted to go into the military, I'd support them, because it can be a great experience to be exposed to something you never would have thought about doing or thinking about or thinking you could do until you get into it. And so any way that you can open, especially when you're young and you're trying to figure out where you want to go or what you want to do, I think the service is a great way to look at that.
Did you have that opinion before your own service, or is that something that developed afterward?
I never really, I kind of did think about doing something. I was watching a lot of documentaries that involved nurses when I was in high school, and I thought there were all these people where the nurses were independent and they were going off and doing these things in foreign countries and everything. I thought that really intrigued me, and I thought that would be really cool to be able to do something like that. And so the military just came along as maybe a way that I could do. I thought, oh, but that was right up my bailiwick, because I was thinking when I got out, I could go out and find out how I wanted to use my nursing license, around the world and do different things. Go out and help third world countries. In fact, the year, I just before I got pregnant with my son, my husband and I decided that if we didn't get pregnant by the end of when my military service was over, that we were going to join the Peace Corps. So he's an engineer and I'm a nurse, and we're going to do the Peace Corps. So we're getting the paperwork ready all for that. So we're ready to go out and do something. It doesn't. I just didn't want to sit home and stay doing the same thing all the time or whatever. I wanted to get exciting things. Yep.
For anybody that's a nurse in the military or a woman in the military, do you have any advice for them?
Wow. What can I say that doesn't sound like a cliche? Uh, well, you're going to be whatever you're doing in your life, whether you're in the military or out of it, you make choices about how you're going to live your life, and you make the choices based on where you're at and what you uh, what you what you want to do, or what direction do you want to go in, and it really is kind of a little scary when you think about the fact that, but for this simple little decision you made at this point in time, that your whole world changed. You know, as I decided to go on that blind date with this crazy guy that was calling up schools of nursing and see if there were any nurses not doing anything. And that's true. He did that. He was with three other guys, but he chickened out. Anyway, yeah, it's just one of those things where you're going to be living your life, wherever you're at, you're going to be living it, whether you're in the military or you're not, and all the choices that you make are up to you, and just be be true to yourself. I think always do what is right, do the right thing. Do the thing that that is going to not hurt anybody, that is going to be kind, be helpful, be supportive. Uh, don't be cynical. Just be a good person, I think, and that'll get you through anything.
That's some good advice. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Kind of a similar-ish question. Since you've had both time as a nurse with the Army and as a nurse as a civilian, would the advice that you would give to an Army nurse and a civilian nurse be different in any way?
I don't think so. It's all nursing. It's all, and nursing. The thing about nursing is it's so varied. You could go. I was in the ER for 5 years, and then the next position I took was in continuing education in a nursing home and long-term care facility. And each one of those jobs was totally, they were one end of the continuum. From ER, you don't get any more urgent than ER. You don't get any more long-term than long-term care. And I found both of the jobs exciting for what the opportunities they offered me to do in different things and to grow. So it just depends on where you are at the time and what decisions you make of where you're going to go. I don't know. I was going to say my last 20 years that I worked before I retired from a job. After 20 years I worked for the Ohio Board of Nursing, and I did a couple jobs with them. One of them was I helped set up the nurse aid training program in the state of Ohio. Every state has to have an STNA program. So I was with a group of nurses, four of us, that set up the program for the state of Ohio. And then after that was set up, then they needed nurse investigators. And so I started doing the investigations for them. And that was real exciting. So I've had and then I retired from that, and I got a really good retirement. And if I hadn't ran into a former boss of mine in the pharmacy of a grocery store, we literally ran into one another, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm taking some time off. I'm looking for another job." And she goes, "Oh, well, if I hear of anything, I'll let you know." And I got home that afternoon, and she had a message on my phone, answering machine, that says, "Diane, the Board of Nursing is going to be calling you tomorrow. Don't faint." And I was like, good. And so it was for the job to get the nurse aid training program started. Well, I had done nurse aid training with the long-term care facility that I just had worked for. So all that was, in fact, when I knew that we were going to have to do something, I said, "Boy, I'd love to get on a state level." And I actually got to do that. So that was exciting to me. Got into that. And then that turned into being the investigator, which got me into all kinds of situations. And it was very exciting. So, you just never know what's going to happen, but it's little decisions that you make along the way, and then open yourself up for new experiences and just see what happens.
Speaking of those experiences, is there anything that you would like people to learn from your experiences or about your experiences?
In what way?
So this is an oral history project, so we'd like you to, put your story in your terms.
Oh.
if someone who, say, has absolutely no experience with the military, what is something that
Mhm.
you'd like them to take away from your story?
I think it can be. It's it doesn't matter, like I said, whether you went to a 3-year school or a baccalaureate school in nursing. It doesn't matter, what kind of a job. It's what you put into it is and what you get out. If you're going to go into something with an idea, well, I'm just going to go into this and I'm going to get through it just because I want to get something at the end of it, and you're not thinking about, it's the end justifies the means. You're not thinking about what's going to happen during that time. When I went to, I'll give you an example. When I went to, I finished my, I was going to go, always going to go on to get my degree because my mother wanted me to get a nursing degree. So I signed up to get to a local university to get my BSN. And my idea was I'm getting in there and I'm going to get my BSN. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to get my BSN and get out of there. I got it in 3 years, got my BSN there in 3 years. Usually takes 5 for some, but I did it because I was a nurse when I went in, helped out. But while I was there, something really strange happened. I started learning new things. I started learning new things that I could apply in everyday life in my nursing that I was doing in the ER. I was going to college while I was in the ER. And so it was like, and I think if I could tell you one or two classes that changed me totally, and you would never guess which classes changed me totally, but it was English 101 and English 102. And I had to take those because I didn't have any college credits. So I had to start out with 101. Everybody said, "You had to take English 101." I said, "Best thing I ever did." And then 102 was argument. I loved that. So anyway, I got through that. And before I knew it, it was time to graduate. And all of a sudden I said, "Oh, and I got a BSN too." I totally forgot about that. I was so eh, getting into everything I studied, I could apply in the ER. I mean, everything: sociology, biology, microbiology, pharmacology, um, spirituality. I mean, all kinds of things. Everything I took, I could find a way where I could apply it. And when I graduated from that BSN program, I was a better nurse. I was a better nurse for it. And I could take care, I was a better advocate for my patients. I had more, I mean, just so much I learned in that. And I forgot about the fact that I was getting a BSN. I was learning so much. It was just amazing. When I got it, I said, "Oh, wow." Oh, the reason I went into that was because I was losing my GI Bill and I had to do it. I went in 79 and my GI Bill was running out soon. So I had to get that paid for. So my military helped me pay for my BSN. So
All right.
that was another thing too.
So you
Economics.
so you were able to get GI benefits.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. Oh, yes. And I bought my house. The mortgage was in my name because it was my GI Bill. Right. And yeah, all kinds of stuff like that. Mhm. Good stuff. I got much more out of it than I put into it. I really did.
Do you identify strongly as being a veteran?
I'd never thought about it much at all until Chris started getting us involved in this thing. I don't know if you know anything about, but with Chris and my mother and I, we're with Uniting Us and Anne. Do you know Anne Marie? She's one director of
Yes, she's
United.
also involved in the project as well.
Yes, yes. Well, anyway, she said, so when you guys got together and talked about your service, how, did you think it was uh, how significant it was that all three of you were at a time during war? And we both said we never talked about it. We never thought about it. We just never. Chris was in it. She was active duty, and then she was out before we got into. She was medically retired before we got into doing that. But I never really thought much about being a veteran. I did one time before then. In 2001, I was at church and it was Veterans. No, it was Memorial Day. Maybe it was Veterans Day. It had to be Memorial Day. And the priest that was there, he was a visiting priest, and he said, "Is there anybody here that has served in the military?" And Richard goes, "You did." And I went, "Oh yeah," like that. And that's the first time I ever really thought about raising my hand and saying, "Yeah, I was in the military," because nobody ever asked, never brought it up. Yeah, just and my daughter just can't believe that mom, because she was she was really heading up the ladder, and if she hadn't have gotten sick, she would have been and amazing. She'd still be in right now. If she maybe she would have been, and she'd have been a general.
Um,
I don't doubt it.
Knowing that your daughter had effects on her health from the war, um, and especially linked to burn pits, in your profession, how was that? How did you view that?
You know what? That's an interesting question because I thought about when Chris joined the military back when she did the ROTC. There's a song that Burl Life sings about this mother who her son went off to go in the military and they shot his legs clean away, and how she was so. And I thought, am I setting her off to get her legs shot clean away? Or, I had that little bit of a thing. If something happened to her, it would be on me because I was supporting her in this. I didn't tell her to, but I supported her in it. Absolutely. And then when she got in and she was going to get out before there was the war, I was fine. And then all of a sudden 9/11 came along. And when Chris went into Iraq was her first one. Iraq was her first one. She went in the day, if you remember the shock and awe of 2003. I don't know if you guys remember shock and awe of 2003. George W. Bush said, we're going up the road to Baghdad and we're going to kick out Saddam Hussein. Chris was behind the Marines. Her group was behind the Marines who were in the front. That's the way I understand it. And she said they were going to jump over. I didn't know what jump over meant. They'd been waiting in Kuwait. She jumped over and she was going up that. And so all the things I was seeing on the news, there was a big sandstorm that came up and there was all this stuff going on. Nobody knew what was going to happen to them. They were all wearing all this kind of, it was very, very stressful. But I didn't know what was going on. And then when I found out where she was at and what was going on, I just did not allow myself to dwell on the fact of she could be harmed. And I never thought about she wasn't coming home. But one of the things that helped that a lot was we were able to email. And so we could email all the time. And so she was night battle captain, which was daytime for us. So my husband was in this room when his office, my office is the other thing in our house. We both had home jobs. And I said, have you heard from the girl yet? And he said, no. And then we'd come in and say, yep, she's fine. So we're good. So we just had that. And then every once in a while she could call and we could talk to her because we're close to Wright Pat Air Force Base. So we could come through it. Whenever it said Wright Pat Air Force Base on our phone thing, we knew it was her. So we could keep in contact, that we knew we weren't over here thinking, oh, what's going on with her. And then when she went to Afghanistan, I never allowed myself to think anything of that. I think I maybe only one time I was worried about, got a little worried, choked up when we were saying our prayers for meal one time, blessing Chris, and I was like, oh, but she goes, stop. Yeah, we won't do that. And when she came home, she made it home both times, and I knew she was going to do that. I just knew it. But then I see all these other things and read books and stuff, and it's like, boy, it can happen to anybody just like that. You can lose them just like that. And I'm glad I don't have to worry about that with her now. But if somebody was in there, I wouldn't obsess on it because you can't. It doesn't help. You got to be supportive.
Yeah, of course. You mentioned this very briefly. There sometimes is a disparity between what is in the news versus what's happening in real life.
Many times, yeah.
Have you noticed, or in your time in the military, did you notice something of that sort? Or
when I was in the military, I didn't. I've been involved in things where being on the fire department, paramedics and stuff like that, or working with the state, in different investigations and stuff. And I would see what was in the media. Many times it's not accurate. Many times not accurate. Some things are minor discrepancies. Other things are a little major. But yeah, there is all kinds of things that are not accurate about what you hear and read if you were there on the scene. Yeah.
Is there anything that you remember in particular being so different than what you knew it to be, or
that I could talk about? Not about my board of nursing stuff. That's all confidential. I can't even. The investigations are all like, yeah, we don't. But I was trying to think of the fire department and stuff. We would see things. And I was trying to think, or maybe the people would come into the emergency room. Richard could, if he listened to the news at night, he'd say, "Oh, he could tell if they were taken to Good Sam. He knew what kind of an evening I had." But I'm trying to think. I just know different things. I was going, no, that's not quite right. And I can't remember specifics, but I just remember kind of like, just everything you read in the paper, just take it with a grain of salt. Some is accurate, but most of the time it's hard to get it. Well, people see things differently. You see it from one angle, somebody sees it from another, and so it looks different. And that's true.
Absolutely.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Is this your first time talking about your experiences as a veteran?
No.
Can you tell us about the first time that you talked about it?
The first time was for veterans. In fact, I have a video of my interview. That was when we were at the Women's Military Memorial, and there was a veterans uh, project that these people were working on, and they were doing videos of veterans, and my mother was in on that, and Chris was in on that. So we were the three generations. That's how. And my mother is 99. She'll be 100 in April. So, and she's still around, still kicking. So, but what was the question again?
Oh, I was just wondering about the first time that you had talked about your
That was it.
experiences as a veteran.
That was in 2021. Yeah, that was when I first thought of, oh yeah, I'm a veteran, but I was only in for that, and Chris gets so mad at me. So I said I was only in for a small amount of time. She just gets so mad about that because I figure she really has given her life. She has sacrificed a lot. I didn't consider what I did a sacrifice. I really didn't.
What did you consider it?
I just considered it was something I chose to do, and then I thought it was my duty. But it wasn't anything that I thought, oh my gosh, I'm giving up so much. Because like I said, I got so much more back. It was not a sacrifice at all. I reaped so many benefits.
And during that time in 2021, when you started talking about yourself as a veteran, what prompted that?
It was being in the Uniting Us, and they were doing these different projects, and they asked us if we would be interviewed for the Veterans Project, and so we all said yeah. But I said I won't have much to say, and I didn't at the time. I think my thing was 10 minutes long. My mother's name was a half an hour, and I think Chris's was 45 minutes, and I was like, I said I don't have that much to say. Yeah, so you guys are asking good questions.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate everything that you've been able to tell us today.
Well,
Truly,
it's my
thank you
pleasure.
for sharing.
Thank you. Well, thank you for asking. It's been a real pleasure.
Is there anything that when you were thinking about this interview as we were getting ready to do it, that you thought that might come up, that you wanted us to bring up that hasn't come up yet?
No, I thought I would just roll with what was going on. Whatever you asked, I would, because I figured I'm only going to tell you what I know, and so they're somewhere the memories are. I figured you trickle the memories, they'll come out. No, I wasn't worried about that. Whatever you wanted to know, I would tell you.
Have any memories been tickled? Anything come up?
Oh yeah, some of the things, yeah, that I don't always tell about my sexual assault, and stuff like that, except in for certain closed groups, if people are sharing things. But now, for the most part, no, that's pretty much. I felt comfortable with telling you everything that we talked about today.
And I really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
You guys handled it very well. So, okay, I'm not going to ask you questions because you're the interviewers.
Yes.
I mean, if
feel
you have
free.
questions, you can go ahead and ask.
100%.
Oh, well, the thing is, that's kind of in my blood because when I was an investigator, we'd have to investigate these. We investigated complaints against people who were registered by the board, registered nurses and LPNs. And so the whole thing was asking questions, getting information, this kind of stuff. So that's kind of in my blood. And whenever my husband does something and I'll ask him all these questions, he says, I'm being interrogated again. So I have to watch it. Yeah. No, I don't want to do that to you guys.
I don't mind.
I don't either. Feel free.
So, all right. So Eliza, you're working on your master's.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what is your master's going to be in?
I'm going to get a master's degree in history.
History. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Chris is, well, she has her bachelor's in history, her master's is in teaching, but she wants to do a PhD in some kind of history. She's looking at something like that. So I'm all for getting more education if you want to. And what are you doing, kiddo?
I am in my bachelor's right now. I am studying English. And then afterward, I would like to do something in museum studies or archival studies.
Wow. Well, so then you appreciated my saying that English, those two classes were the most important classes I took
I know I was going to ask you about it, but
yeah.
it's English. I can imagine it was some writing and maybe
What
some
I
more.
learned, the thing was, when I was 32 years old when I went into the classroom as a freshman, and my teacher was my age. So she took me outside the classroom one time while everybody else was doing something. She had doing busy work, and she said, "You and I are about the same age." So she said, "I can talk to you about it." And so it was just really. But what I learned was I learned all of the. I fine-tuned all the stuff that I was supposed to pay attention to in high school in English, and then she taught us how to get the right words and make our point. And so when we were writing papers, it was focused on what the point is and make sure you have your words and everything, that makes sense. And then in argument, the second one, 102, was argument, and that was how to really defend yourself. And my husband found out I was taking a class in argument. He said, "You don't need a class in argument." I said, "No, I'm just sharpening my skills." But they really did help, because later on in the nursing program, I used all of those skills for doing made me successful in the nursing part of it, and also out in the public. And when I was writing uh, objectives and evaluations for if you're teaching something, for CEUs and stuff, you have to know how to make everything coordinate. What do you want to get? How are you going to evaluate what you get? How are you going to know what you did? And also when you're taking care of patients, if somebody comes into the emergency room, you have to look at all these things, compare it with that, put it with your knowledge base, write it down so everybody can understand what you're talking about. English is so important. Speaking your language.
I'm glad you understand.
Yeah.
Not many people do, I'll be honest.
Well, yeah,
So
I'll tell you,
thank you.
there was one time when I was thinking, why am I not an English major? Because English majors don't have to go do clinicals and stick needles into people. And I said, I got to do that stuff. And I don't, and I, you didn't have to worry about killing anybody. I suppose you could kill them with your words sometimes, but anyway, but that's it really, how you communicate and all that is just makes a big difference, how you can write and how you can speak with people and everything. And I've been retired for 15 years, so I've kind of gotten out of practice because I'm just kind of enjoying my life. But yeah, it's fun. There's lots of things going on.
It is. It's a good time.
And I wish you both good luck in your careers. What are you going to do with it what are you going to do Eliza, when you...
I actually want to teach it at a community college.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of, have you
Yes.
ever considered auditing classes in continuing education, since this is clearly something that you're very passionate about?
Yeah, continuing ed, I loved it. I was continuing ed director for this nursing home for 4 years. And so I did all the if you're in a nursing home, you have like 5 mandatory nurse in-services you have to do a year for fire safety and infection control and all those kinds of things. And also things to educate the nurses and the nursing assistants and even the patients at times. So it was a big challenge. I even taught a course in management. I never managed a thing in my life. That's when I went on to get my master's, because I thought, yeah, I got my master's I got it in healthcare administration, so that if I would know something about it if I was going to be teaching it. But it also came in handy when I started working for the board, because then when I was dealing with administrators and directors of nursing, I had the same degrees they had in their walls, so we could talk, which that helped that too. But yeah, oh yeah, go on and get your...
Yeah. In your past 15 years, is it in retirement?
Yes, it is. Last 15 years has been retirement.
What are some things that you like to do to pass your time?
Well, what's interesting is when I was telling my boss that I was going to retire 15 years ago, and she's about 20 years younger than me at the time. And she said, "Well, Diane, what are you going to do when you retire?" And I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do, Lisa, but I know what I'm going to be." And she said, what's that? And I said, available. And I said, I just know that there are things that I would not be able to do if I had a job full time, that I wanted to be available to do other things. And I will tell you, practically from the get-go, I was available. And I went from Tacoma, Washington to Virginia and Texas and all around with family and friends and things that were going on with their health that I could go and advocate for them and help them out with. And I have been, in fact, I had a very dear friend. My very dear friend was diagnosed, put in hospice, right just before I retired, and I was able to be with her, getting her to a chemo and blood transfusions, and with her when she died, and with her family, and that, and I wouldn't have been able to have that experience and to be that involved if I wasn't available. So I just knew there was something God was telling me, I've got something else I want you to do for a while over here. And I knew there was something there, and I was just waiting. And I never had it was always, sometimes I would be doing there were some years there was not a month I didn't go out of, my husband would be here taking care of the place by himself. but it was just things that it was so nice that I could do those. And that was very rewarding to me, to be able to do those things and be able to really help in my retirement. I retired my nursing license. I didn't want to do nursing anymore, but you still have the knowledge that you can help people and guide them and get them to the right care. And, I could tell people when to see the doctor, what are you doing? What do you say? Go see your doctor. One of those things. So, yeah. So that 15 years, what I've done is, see, with Chris being with us now, that's very interesting because a lot of my travel was following Chris around all over different parts of the country. And then I have other family members too that I did things with, but not traveling as much anymore, though I did just get back from Arizona a couple of weeks ago. I have a sister out there that's sick, pretty bad. But we still, I'm there, I'm available, and we're just I feel so blessed that we have the resources that I can jump on a plane and go somewhere and, help make a difference, or drive. My sister and I drove to Texas to Dallas from Ohio, and it was a trip, but it was well worth the time what we had to do.
That's great.
So that's basically, that's it.
That's great. I really admire your continued passion in helping people, regardless of whether you are working or not. That's incredible.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I think sometimes I've worked harder at that than I was when I was working, because at the end of the day, 5 o'clock, I was done, shut the door. But when you're in somebody's life and helping them out and stuff, and very difficult. I'm not difficult. It's very challenging. And there's a lot of reward that comes when you know that you really help them, and the family or whatever. Yeah. And that's just, it wasn't really like she said, what do you do? I said, I'm just going to be available. And I had no idea what that meant when I said it, but I just knew that I had to be available. There was something that said to me, you are going to be needed someplace else. And I was 65 when I retired.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if you knew you wanted to be a nurse from about the time that you were 10, taking care of people has been a very consistent through line in your life, huh?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, really. Yeah. Sort of, it's funny, though, I couldn't stand a sight of blood. And so when I went into nursing school, I was thinking, oh gosh, I hope I don't see too much blood. I think I'll go in psychiatric nursing. There's no blood in that. And then I they took us to, this was back in the 60s when they still had the mental institutions where they locked you in. I saw people getting thrown I said, oh, there's blood here too. So, but yeah. But anyway, like I said, you get all out of all that and you get into what you can do. When you get enough knowledge, you can help. That you don't see the blood and the gore, you see the person underneath that needs help, and you see what you need to do, what you can do to calm them down, so that so they'll feel better, feel not so scared maybe, or whatever they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like you've lived a very impactful life for the people around you.
I hope so. I hope there isn't anybody that I damaged too much. One of the things I would always say, and you ask us about any nurse, when I would be driving down the road, going to the hospital in ER, I'd say, God, please don't let me hurt anybody. Don't let me kill anyone today. Don't let me make any mistakes. Let me be able to handle everything that comes in, because you never know. Once I got there, I didn't worry about that. All the way down, I was like, But once I got there, it was all, just all came and was smooth because of the background and everything, and the people that I worked with, and that sort of thing.
Thinking of all the times that you've had throughout your life, is there anything specific you would like to be remembered by?
What do I want to be remembered about? Just that I was a kind person. A kind person. I always think somebody said, "Well, I saw you. I know you before. I saw you out somewhere." And I said, always thinking, "Gee, I hope I was nice to them." But there have been a few times in my life where I haven't been too nice to people, and so I don't know. I've lately well, I got more grown up. I'm much better, much nicer. You can lose your temper about little things, but anymore, I don't worry too much about what anybody, might get a bad feeling from me, because I try really hard not to be judgmental and confrontational, and that.
No, of
Yeah.
course. Thank you.
That's something I've been working on lately in my in the last 15 years, when you have a lot of freedom to do.
In terms of, being angry or losing your temper, do you think that had to do anything with your trauma from being in the military or anything of that sort?
No, no. I think that was just something that the immaturity and sometimes just being, what I want to say, um, not confident. And sometimes when you're not confident or you're scared in a situation, you will react that way. So no, I don't. No, I don't worry so much about that anymore. So I'm not that. I don't. Uh, I'm not threatened by a lot of things, or worry about things that would make me upset. You know.
Absolutely.
But I don't think I need to do with military. No, I think I was just growing up.
Understandable. Thank you so much for answering that question. I've been doing my best to stay silent and listen without asking all of my questions. But if I may, I'd like to ask you one more.
Sure.
Another project I did with Virginia Tech alumni who served in the Vietnam War, part of the reason for that project was it was the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon.
Yeah, 75. Yeah.
Right. And I'm curious, where were you? What were you thinking? What do you remember about that?
Oh, well, I remember it happened. Did it happen after Johnson died? President Johnson?
I'm not
It was
sure
somewhere
when
around that
Johnson.
time, I think, when Saigon fell. That was, I just thought that I would have, it was so hard to be there. And that, you see that anytime we see in Afghanistan, when we pulled out of there. I mean, there's just no easy way to do it, and it's just hard. And the people that are back there, the ones, especially the ones that helped us, the interpreters and that sort of thing. I don't know in Vietnam. I didn't. I think I'm a little more emotionally involved with the Iraq and Afghanistan because Chris served in both of them.
That was
And
I wanted to ask,
Yeah.
having a daughter who served
Mhm.
in Afghanistan and yourself having served in Vietnam.
I didn't go to Vietnam, but in the
Well,
era.
in the era.
Right.
Like, did watching the fall of Kabul also resurface some of those memories from 1975 for you?
I think it probably was going around in my head a little bit of all the people trying to hang on to the helicopters and things that were everybody being so panicked, and it's just unimaginable. Especially when you were helping people and then they pull up and you're gone. They can't do anything about it. And a lot of people lost their lives because of that in Vietnam and in Afghanistan.
Right. Thank you for sharing that with me. That was a real
Yeah.
point of curiosity with that project, and since your Vietnam era as well. And I just want to, before my students wrap up the interview, I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you for participating in the project and for sharing your story so generously with the students and raising an outstanding daughter yourself.
Oh, thank you. I wish I could take credit. She is very amazing. She is very amazing. She's always been since she was little. She's always been beyond her years. Yeah.
All right, I guess if we're supposed to be wrapping this up, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us, Diane?
Thank you so much for involving me in this, and good luck with what you're doing, because this is I think you're going to get a lot of good information that needs to be shared, I think.
I agree. That's the hope.
And Jason, you too. Thank you.
Thank
His
you
name's
for your
Jason,
time.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Well, here is this. They've presented this to you
Oh, what is this?
as a point for
Huh?
participating.